All right, today we're going to talk about while loops. And a while loop is used in a lot of different languages. Almost every language has some concept of a while loop. And so we're going to teach this in Ruby. Ruby has some shortcut ways of doing loops that are nice, but we'll learn about those later. I want to get this concept down first. So if I wanted to write a program to count down from 10, let's do it the other way first. It's a little easier to think about. Counting from 0 to 10 and printing the number on the screen, how would I go about that? Okay, so you should have done some while loops in Visual Basic, did you not? You did. Okay, a little bit. All right, so they're not completely foreign to you. A while loop requires three different things, I like to say. It requires three items. All right, it requires an initial condition. It requires a Boolean expression that will end the loop, and it requires some statement in the while loop that will modify the Boolean expression. In other words, we need some way of ending the loop. All right? So let's talk about this a little bit. So usually we have some concept of a counter. And a counter is a variable that I store a number into, and I can keep adding a number into that counter and checking the value of that counter to see if I've finished counting. Okay? So I might have a variable called count, and I'm going to assign that some number. So let's assign it a number of 1. All right? So the first concept of a while loop, if I want to count up to and including the number 10, what would my Boolean expression be to keep running this loop? While some Boolean expression do something, and then I have to change something to end the loop. All right, so this is number 1 from above, the initial condition. This is 2, and this is 3. So this is my initial condition. This is my Boolean expression. And this is my something to change the Boolean expression. So what would it be if I want to count up, count from 1 through 10? What would my Boolean expression be? All right, so there's a couple ways to do that. I could say, while my count is less than 11, what would be another way to do that? Okay. This is there are 3 ways to do that. Let's put these up to the side. I can say while count is less than 11. I could say while count not equal 10, and while count less than or equal to 10. All right, so there are 3 different concepts here. They all kind of almost do the same thing. They almost do the same thing. These 2 I consider identical. The first and the third one are identical. The second one can be a dangerous condition, okay? Because this only tests one condition. And it's possible if something goes wrong in your loop and you skip 10, your loop will go on forever. There's no, it's too narrow of a condition. I like to think of it that way. It's too specific. It's too easy to break. Yeah.
So wouldn't you want to put your count is, while count does not equal whatever your variable is set to?
No, that's what I'm saying. This is a dangerous way. Yeah, I would say no.
Not like an actual number, but
it wouldn't matter if I had a number as a variable called 10. It's the same thing. It's too specific. It's too specific. Does everybody see that? If I was counting by twos, somehow my count variable changed inside the loop and it happened to skip 10, your loop is going to go on forever.
If count equals count times count, then
Yeah, somehow you're getting above it, you're going to skip it. Yeah. So this is a dangerous way to do this. It's dangerous, too specific. All right, so, and since I'm doing 10, I don't like to change my number that I'm counting to, so I would prefer to make it less than or equal to 10, because I'm not talking about 11 here, I'm talking about 10. It keeps the focus on what we're doing. So I'm going to use this version here. And we'll put all these way over here, get them out of the way. So while my count is less than 10, as I'm writing a while loop, yeah, that's the Big Bang. What's the guy's name on Big Bang that talks like that? Whatever. No, he's got a lisp that talks about W's. Okay, so as I'm writing the while loop, the first thing I want to do, I want to do all three of my conditions. I have my initial condition, my Boolean expression, and I need to change my loop so I don't forget to do that. Because if I forget to do that, I'm going to end up with an infinite loop. And I guarantee that you as a developer will write many infinite loops in your lifetime. Just guaranteed. I've done it myself a lot. And so to try to alleviate that, I try to get my change of my expression done first. So I'm going to say I need to increment my count. So how do I change my count variable? Okay, I can say count plus equals 1, which is the same thing as count equals count plus 1. So I'm taking the variable, I'm adding 1 to its contents, and I'm stuffing it back into the variable. All right? So that changes my condition. So at some point, my while loop should stop. If all things happen correctly, it should stop. Now I want to print out the value as I'm going through this loop. So what would I print? Count, right. So I'm going to put out my count. And that should then print out values from 1 to 10. So let's do that. Run my loops. Look at that. Is that cool? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. On one at a line, one at a time, working great. Right? Any questions on that? Any questions on a while loop like that?
what happens if you put in prints?
Print? All right. Good question. So let's do that. Print, count. It prints it all on the same line because it didn't put the carriage return at the end of each count. All right, so it just depends on what you're wanting there. All right, so I want you to take this while loop that I have, and I want you to use it to count to 100 first. So let's change the loop. What would I change to count to 100 instead of 10? Up to and including 100. All right, so all I have to do is change my Boolean expression here to go a little higher. All right, good. So there we go. We now count to 100. Now, what would I do to change this to print only the even numbers between 0 and 100?
You could do an if statement.
I could. So I'm going to pause this. I've heard that that's the case. I know BASIC. I mean, that's a really old language. But all right, so the first way possibly to do it would be to set my initial value to 2 and then increment my count by 2 every time. So instead of adding 1 to it, I'm going to add 2 to it. What was the other way? Somebody had an if condition in there? How could I do that? You had a thought, but we need to complete that.
If count is divisible by 2 equals 0,
All right, so we want to check if my count, well, let's do the first one first. Let's actually do this. I'll set it to 2, change this to 2, run it, and now I've got the even numbers from 2 up through 100. So that was easy. Let's go back to the other one, and we're going to do an if count divided by 2 is equivalent to 0. All right, and we'll take this counts out. All right, let's see if that works. All right, so we're on the right track a little bit, but what happens if I have a number? Let's do this in IRB. If I take 4 and divide by 2, what am I going to get? If I take 5, 6, let's do an odd number, if I can type it. 5 divided by 2 is 2. 8 divided by 2. So I'm never going to get 0. So you're on the right track. I need to use modulus. Okay, so modulus is a new concept that in Ruby we write it with a percent sign that says take the two values, take count, divide it by 2, and return to me the remainder of what's left in integer math. Okay, so way back in, let's probably 3rd grade, you did division with the thing like this, the little symbol on the board here. You take 3 goes into 7. How many times? You put the 2 up here. 2 times 3 is 6. We have a 1 left over. And way back in the old days, we wrote this how? Do you remember? We put an R, 1. At least that's what I did back in the 60s, 1960s, okay? So that's how we first learned the division. We had some remainder left over, so we put it here. So the modulus gives us just the remainder of doing the 7 divided by 3. So let's do it in IRB to show you that. If I do 7 mod 3, I get a 1 back. If I do a 7 mod 2, what am I going to get back? A 1. If I do an 8 mod 2, what do I get back? 0. If I do a 9 mod 2, what do I get back? 1. A 10 mod 2, what do I get back? 0. So you see a pattern going here. Every time the number that I'm dividing by, modulusing by, is even, I get a 0 back. There's no remainder. If I'm always modulusing by 2 or dividing the number by 2, I'm always going to get a 0 back. If it's odd, I'm always going to get a 1 back. So you see the pattern there? Pardon me?
It creates a Boolean.
It does. It creates a true or false, an alternating 0 and 1. So if I say count mod 2 is equivalent to 0, then I can know that this is an even number. So is this even? Even. If it's even, I want to print it out. So now let's see if this works. Look at that. It's beautiful. Everybody see that? So that's a new expression that you can use to determine if it's odd or even. Now this is used a lot to determine if a number is odd or even. So Ruby added a nice little feature to this. Since count is what type of variable? What data type is held in here? Integer. It comes from the integer class, so I can do integer-y stuff with it. There is a method in the integer class called odd or even. I can say if count.even with a question mark. The question mark is part of the name of the method. That just tells you, in Ruby, the question mark tells you that this will return a Boolean expression, a true or false. So it reads nicely in English. If count is even, and you raise your voice a little bit because it's got a question mark, right? If count is even, I'm going to put out my count. So this works exactly the same way without knowing how modulus works. And there is the other way you might expect to be odd. If count is odd, question mark, then I have those. I think it's in a 190 and up they added that. Isn't that cool? Nice little method there. Any questions on any of that? All right. So let's count. How would I change this now to count down from 100 and print only the odd numbers? All right. So I set my initial condition to be the initial condition. I'm going to start from a number at 100. I'm going to change my internal condition changing statement to subtract a 1. And now what do I do? Is that enough? Let's run it. Look at that. That is my first infinite loop of the day. All right, why is that? Because count is always less than or equal to 100. It's never going to quit. All right? So how do I get out of this? I have to hit this little square here. And it says, yes, I want to disconnect that guy. And, right, it'll have a problem eventually. All right, so I need to change this entire expression to be greater than or equal to 0. And there you go. So printed out the odd numbers all the way down. Any questions on that? So you can see a while loop has 3 pieces. The initial condition, where I'm going to start my loop from. Some Boolean expression that tells my loop to continue until something happens. And then inside of my loop, I have to change whatever it is so that my while loop will finish eventually, so that my Boolean expression finishes. Now this does not have to be numbers, and I don't have to increment. I can use anything I want as a Boolean expression as long as something changes inside of it. If I did something like this, what would happen? It would run forever, printing out a number, and just like I did before, right? So it's basically the same thing I had before, and it's going to run, pretty much forever until my computer crashes. So there are cases, you actually see cases like that in the world, that I'm going to run a loop forever, waiting until something in here changes. And this something in here might be exiting the program or something like that. Your main gaming loops, for instance, run something like that. While they haven't quit the program, keep getting input from the keyboard and the joystick and your controllers, and then do something with that, and then go back and do it again. Go get more input from the user, go get more input from the user, until they hit some key combination, or until they hit Control-C, or they reboot the computer, or whatever it takes, right? So some way to get out of that. You usually have some while loop that controls your main program. All right. Any questions on that? Isn't this fun? Say yes, Mr. Dave. This is fun. Thank you. All right, so let's do some more. Let's comment this out. How would I draw a box? All right, so let's say I wanted to draw a box that looked like this. Let's see, let's do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And internally I'm going to have this type of a structure. And at the bottom I'm going to have this type of structure. All right? So I have 8 asterisks across, 8 asterisks down. How would I draw that? Let's first analyze what pieces of this box are static and what pieces change. You know, what you think, which lines are the same. Okay, let's start with that. Which lines are the same in these cases? First and last, so this is the same as the last. And these all here are all the same, right? So we have a bunch in the middle. How many do we have in the middle? I've got 6. I should have 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if I'm doing an 8-sided square box, I have 6 of these duplicated lines and a first and a last one that are the same. So that if I did a 10-sided box, how many would I have in the middle? 8. You start to see a pattern there. How many duplicated middle lines do I have based on the number of the side that I want? 2 less. It's always 2 less than what I'm printing, right? So let's start this out. You have to block all this out. All right. So let's just say it's an 8-sided. We'll go back to an 8. And this is going to be 6. So let's do a while loop. What are the 3 things I need for my while loop? I want you to think of these every time you think of a while loop. Initial condition. So I'm going to have a counter. And what are we going to set it to? Doesn't really matter. Let's set it to 0 and see how that comes out. Then I have a while. What am I going to have here? What parts of these can I run in a while loop and what parts can't I? Can I put this in a while loop? Would that make sense?
Yeah, let's just count A. Well, no,
You put the center in a while.
All right, very good. So I'm going to, these lines I want to print inside the while loop. These can be printed just on one line at the beginning of the while loop and one line at the end of the while loop. Does everybody see that? In this case, I mean, I think some of you might have been thinking I could have had a while loop to print the 8 asterisks to start with, right? But there's an easier way to do that. So let's do while count is what? Less than, if I'm going to draw 6, not 86. How many?
is less than 8. Or less than 7.
Less than count minus 2.
Not count minus 2. Let's just hard code it for now. We're going to do an 8-sided box. The inner loop is going to be drawing 6 of these. So if I'm counting from 0, what's my top number going to be? We have some discrepancies here, don't we? So if I made it 7, we're counting from 0. Now this is why programmers are always off by 1. Because in programming, we typically count from 0. So if you hold up your hand and we count to this would go all the way up through 6, right? So we count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many numbers is that? 7. We count from 0, we added 1 to the end. So I don't want to count up to 7, I want to count up to less than 6, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so there's 5. So that's 6 values, and so we're going to count less than 6.
Take off your shoes.
I know. I think I need to have my shoes off. All right.
Is less than 76.
Yeah, one of those 2 numbers. All right. So inside of this, what am I going to print? basically one of these lines here, right? Okay, one of those lines. And at the beginning, I'm going to print this. And at the end, I'm going to print this. Now, what's wrong with my loop? Let's just run it and see. Did I miss something? It looks like I missed something. Looks like it's getting bigger. What did I miss? I need to increment my counter. I need to change that Boolean expression in some way. Wow. It didn't actually stop. It's really slowing my computer down. There we go. Disconnect. Thank you. So I need to change that initial condition or my Boolean expression. Count equals. You think it's minus equals? I can't even type a minus. Minus equals 1. So if I do that, let's trace through this in our mind. We start with 0. Count is less than 6, so that's true. We're going to print out one line. Then we're going to decrement our count. So count is now negative 1. Come back up to the top. Is negative 1 less than 6? Yes. So count will never change this. It's an infinite loop. So we need to change that to a plus equals. And that should print out our nice little guy for us. Look at that. Isn't that sweet? Nice little box. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inner lines. And the 2 top and bottom make 8. So I have an 8-sided box. All right, so this is nice if I only want to ever draw an 8-sided box. But what if I want to ask the user for how big I want the box to be? So let's prompt them, print, enter the size. And then how do I get the value from the user? Gets, and I need to store that in a variable. So I'm going to say size equals gets dot 2i. Very good. Dot 2i. I'm going to convert it to an integer right away. So size holds what data type? Integer. Okay. So I can do math and stuff with it. It'll be really useful to use that. So instead of printing, okay, so this is from your first assignment, your header assignment you turned in yesterday. How did you print 60 asterisks? Right? An asterisk times 60, right? So if I know how many I need to go across, what would I use here? An asterisk times size. Very good. All right? So that will print the top of the square. So I'm going to use that on the top and the bottom. All right, let's just see how this works so far. Enter the size of the box. Let's say I want a 4-sided box. So it did print my 4 sides fine. My top and bottom have 4 asterisks. Now I need to change how many I'm doing these internal loops as. All right? Now, you might actually write your program this way, the way this triangle that I'm having you draw. You hard code it first. You start to see some patterns between some numbers that change, and you can start to relate them to the only number you're given, which is the size. So we only have one number that we can base all the rest of our calculations on. So count is less than 6 wouldn't be right. It's going to be less than what? All right, let's do size. Let's do size to start with. So if I enter a 4, I'm printing 1, 2, 3, 4, plus I have my top and bottom, which is 6 now. I have a 6 high box and a, well, we haven't fixed this yet, but a 6 high box. So is that right? No. All right, so it's not quite size. It's always size, some modification of size. Minus 2. Okay, good. So I can subtract 2 from that and just put it right here in the same expression. And let's run it again. I'll do a 4. And now I've only got a 4-sided top box, okay? So we fixed that one piece of the problem. Now the next problem is internally I need to change this to print an asterisk followed by what is variable in this line? The spaces, right? So the spaces have to be printed some variable number of times, all right? So instead of doing this hard-coded like this, I'm going to change puts, and then I'm going to add some number of spaces, right? And how can I have some number of spaces here? A variable, okay? Remember, how did I get a bunch of asterisks? I multiplied them by a number. So I can take a space, which is just a string, and multiply it by a number. What number would that be? All right, times size minus 2. And then I need the ending asterisk at the end of that line, right? Plus a single asterisk. All right, so let's see what happens here. 4. Look at that. Is that sweet? Now, do I just leave it like this and turn it in? No. I have to test it on some other numbers. 10. 10 looks pretty good. Let's run it again and do a biggie. 20. Nice. Look at that. It's all working good. If I do a 6. Now, that's pretty good. Now, what have I not tested? 0. All right. So let's see what happens when I run 0. But it printed some blanks. So that's not quite right. How about if I just do 1? What? What? How about 1? Is 1 right? No, it should be a single asterisk. So there's a special case there you'll have to do. A special case denotes what in a language? An else, an if then else kind of a statement. If the number is such and such, I only want to print a single asterisk. If the number is a little bigger than that, I might want to do something else. So let's do 2 as well. 2 works. 3 works. So 2 and up work fine. 1 and 0 are some special cases you're going to have to deal with. All right? Any questions on any of that? Isn't that fun? Now your triangle is just going to be a little more difficult, but very similar to this kind of a structure. It should not be much more than a couple more lines from this, maybe another 5 lines of code. All right, so let's stop that.